Well, welcome to our Cultural Talk Story series. My name is Jose Barzola. I'm from the Matsonai Institute for Peace here at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. Our first Cultural Talk story will focus on the Sámi, the land of the green gold, with Emmie Shukla and Eero Orbas. Thank you for joining us today to sit down at our table to learn about Indigenous communities near and far. Let's start today's event by introducing Emmie Shukla, who's passionate about impacting change through conservation and research. She especially focuses on environmental and cultural issues and how they affect conflict. 4 years ago, she started a nonprofit called the Kind Learning Organization to provide aid to the community education systems in Vanuatu. Emmie, take it away.
Hi, everybody. Thank you to Jose and the Matsunaga Institute for organizing this whole thing and making it possible. And thank you, everybody, for being here. We were definitely not expecting this kind of turnout, so it means a lot to Eero and me that you decided to join us for the next hour. We're not sure if we have time for Q&A afterwards, but if you have any questions for Eero or myself, just leave them in the chat and we'll get to them via email. For anyone who doesn't know me, my name's Emmie, nice to meet you. I met Eero 2 years ago now, and we've been working on a project documenting changes in traditional Sámi culture and problems that the community is facing and worries about the continuation of the culture in the future. We've traveled to the northern parts of Arctic Norway and Sweden and Finland and interviewed Sámi elders and families and basically just listened to their experiences. And we've tried to take this project now in a more actionable direction. So we're in the middle of organizing a peace building talk between different land stakeholders and trying to find a compromise that works with both sides and acknowledges the existence of the people and the culture and allows for the continuation of industry and Sámi culture and ways of life. And the second part is raising public awareness and trying to be a little bit louder about the underrepresented Sámi perspective, which is why we're all here today. Eero is a 10th generation Sámi reindeer herder, and it only stops there because there's no written records before then. He is part of the Finnish Sámi community and is a good friend of mine, and this project would not exist without him. So with that being said, Eero, many people here might not know who the Sámi people are. Could you give us some quick information about them?
Yeah. So hello everybody. So I am a reindeer herder from Finnish Lapland, and as Emmie said, I'm doing the reindeer herding in 10th generation, but who knows how long our family has been doing it because there's no written history before that. So the Sámi people are living in Sweden, Norway, Finland, and Russia. But we are really tight group, and we have relatives almost in all countries. And there's about 10,000, probably 10,000 people left who speak the Sámi language. And usually the Sámi people, they are reindeer herders, or then they are the fishermen. They are the two main living things for the Sámi people. So that's shortly about who the Sámi people are.
And the history also includes just appalling human rights violations of forced assimilation that many Indigenous people around the world have also experienced. But things like children being forcibly taken from their homes at primary school ages and being forced into these boarding schools that enforced ideas of social Darwinism, the basis of eugenics, and taught that the Sámi were intrinsically lesser and didn't allow them to return to their homes. Schools and governments and missionaries banned speaking the language, which obviously the consequences of this are huge if you think about centuries of oral history and ties to cultural identity and specialized knowledge. Just is all gone within a generation. And it seems like all of this is really terrible and antiquated, but this was still happening in the 20th century. So Eero, if you wouldn't mind saying how this continues today for you and your perspective. And I know that you and I were talking about trying to get Sámi language lessons for your children, and that story about feeling too Sámi or not Sámi enough?
Yeah, so the Sami language has been forbidden language in parts of the Lapland. Like in my home village, my home village was the last part of this area where I'm living, where they spoke the Sami language. And then the Sami language and culture was forbidden. So the children were not allowed to speak Sami language in the school. And for every Sami word, you have to stay 3 hours after school. So it was a really, really powerful way of getting rid of the language and rid of the culture. So in just 2 generations, the language in our area, it extincted. And still, when I was in 7th grade in school, it was not allowed to study the Sami language. So basically, I have learned the language home. My parents don't speak the language, and I can't write the language because I didn't have the chance to learn it. And it felt almost impossible to get the language teaching for the children, because for the county and the government, they just were not willing to teach the language. So after a long struggle, all those parents who want their children to learn the language, we get the name list, collect all the students, and we also look for the teacher who can teach the language. And now our children, they can again learn the language, but still they have to learn it from home through the internet connection, because there was no chance that the teacher will come to every school to teach the language. So it's getting a bit better from that time when I was in school. Was that too long?
What about, you said you felt the pressures of feeling too Sámi or not Sámi enough versus North versus South, and depending on who you're talking to. Do you think that discrimination is kind of left over from the assimilation attempts and things?
Yeah, when you travel more south from here and you go out of the Sami home area, so if you wear the traditional clothes, you get bad looks. Sometimes people are yelling to you, and it is quite common that if you try to comment something like in Facebook or Instagram or something, then there is a group of the people who really don't like the Sami people. Usually you get attacked by the group, and then the conversation, it just doesn't work, because the public opinion about the Sami people, it's really bad. They really don't like the Sami people. And I think it's because if there is some things that are wrong, that are making our life with the reindeers impossible here, usually the media wants to make it so there is 2 sides and they put them against each other. So the regular Finnish people, they think that the Sami people, they are against everything, against of progress, and they just want everything to be like it has been like hundreds of years, which probably we would like it to be, but it's not just possible. But we would like that everything would be made so that there would be a chance for us and for our children to continue reindeer herding, which this moment doesn't really seem to be a very probable thing if everything goes on like this for 10 or 20 years.
So do you think that the media misrepresents the Sami people?
Yeah, definitely they do, because if there is, you can't make big news, you cannot make the money. So they want to make the money with the news, and it's just coincidence that the Sami people are one that you can easily put against the government or some other like mining companies or forest industry. And because they are so small group, they cannot make their voice to be heard, so they are easy target for media.
Yeah. So can you talk about why it's difficult sometimes to be recognized as Sami within the Sami community and in the government? And I know it's different policy-wise between the 3 Scandinavian countries, but why in Finland it's so important to be recognized as Sami when you have Indigenous policy that's potentially protective, but that hasn't been enacted yet?
Yeah, well, the first thing, it's really difficult to exactly identify who is the Sami people, because there is not a real status that shows that you are Sami. It's like group identifying, and the one of the strongest part of the identification is language. And because of the church and the government, the wide areas, the language was extincted. So it makes really difficult to know who is the Sami and who is not. So of course, those people who still had the chance to keep their language, they think that those who have lost their language, they are not anymore Sami people. So there is, it creates some conflict inside the Sami community. And about the protecting the Sami people, I think the government really, they don't really give a support to Sami people. And Finland is one of the few countries who has not ever, how do you say it, they have not ratified the ILO contract, which is the worldwide contract about the rights of the native people. So they are not really doing so much to help Sami people and to help them to keep their language and culture and their way of living.
I remember when we talked last, you were saying about how reindeer herding and identifying as Sami has kind of fragmented Sami people within the community, where you have this occupational versus genetic identifying factor, and people have started arguing. Can you talk about that maybe?
Yeah, how can I explain it? Like, Yeah, we again, if you try to explain it, you come back to the language it is, and that how important it is to be identified as a Sami people. So, and then of course, then it can be that in some families, part of the family can be recognized as a Sami people and part not. So it is really complicated thing, and it creates lots of friction inside the Sami community, because there is not straight rules who is Sami and who is not. So it is like how do you say it in English? It's like line in the water. So it's really difficult to determine who is Sami and who is not. I think I cannot explain it more clear.
That's great. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the 10-year reindeer cut that's happening but hasn't happened this year, and just explain that for some background before we ask the next question.
Yeah, so first we have the maximum limit of the reindeers in Lapland, and then Lapland, if the Finnish Lapland has divided to 50 smaller reindeer herding areas, which also have the maximum number of reindeers. And again, these smaller areas, they are divided between the families. And like in our area, the families have their maximum number of reindeers what they can have. And the maximum number of reindeers is decided by the government. They measure the maximum number of reindeers from that, how much food there is in forest for the reindeers, and in what condition the pastures of the reindeers are. And then because there is lots of heavy forest industry in Lapland, and when they cut down the forest, after that they are tilling over the land, and of course all the reindeer food is getting underground, and there's nothing left for the reindeers to eat. So of course the pastures are getting worse and worse all the time. So after 10 years they always say that, okay, there's too many reindeers because the pastures are in too weak condition. But it's not because there's too many reindeers. It is because of the land usage, not because of the reindeers. So it has been like last 30 years. Every 10 years, the reindeer maximum number has been cut down. And it basically always means that few families have to quit reindeer herding every 10 years. So there is less and less reindeer herders left, and then we have to use more and more equipment to gather the reindeers, because there is not just anymore enough people working there. Like when I started reindeer herding in our group, there was almost 20 men in the best days in the forest. And now we are really happy if there is 7 of us. And we have to do the same amount of work in same amount of time. So it makes it really hard. And it also makes it more difficult, because we have to do the so large wide area. So now we are working more and more time alone in the forest. And then if there is two reindeer herders or three reindeer herders in the same direction gathering the reindeers, we are really happy about it. So it's changing really fast.
You were talking about how there are fewer and fewer reindeer herders. For the future of reindeer herding, could you talk about how the reindeer herding is being taught differently now versus how it was when, say, you were learning?
Yeah, when I started the reindeer herding as a young boy, it was just every year we have to buy a pair of rubber boots, and then we packed everything in backpacks and head to the forest by foot. And of course, the winter time it was already made with the snowmobiles, so it was really easy for the young people to get in to the work. But nowadays, when you start reindeer herding, the first thing, if you want to go and work with the reindeers, you have to have the quad bike. Yeah, and it means that it is not easy for the young people to get into the work because they cannot afford to have all the equipment that you need. And it means that the reindeer herders are getting to the work older and older, so they don't learn the landscape as well as like we did when we were young, and they don't get used to how the reindeers behave, and it also makes the reindeer herding more difficult. And then nowadays you also have to feed the reindeers through the winter because there has been so heavy forest industry that there is virtually no winter pastures left anymore. So I remember when we started to feed reindeers in the beginning of the 90s, and it was basically from halfway of the January to the beginning of March, and the feeding was made to the forest. And then the time has been getting longer and longer, and of course there's one part is the climate change. So this year the reindeer feeding already started in November, and we still have about 50-60 centimeters of snow, so the reindeer feeding is still going on. So it's getting more expensive all the time, and of course it makes a huge difference in the profit of our work.
Could you explain to anybody who might not know how a year would look for a reindeer herder, so summer pastures versus winter pastures, and how some countries still practice nomadism and Finland doesn't?
Yeah, the reindeer herding year starts in the beginning of June, and the reindeers are roaming free, and in end of June we collect the reindeers to the fence so we can make the earmarks for the newborn calves. And after that they can roam free in the forest until to the October, which is the main reindeer herding season. It is the time when we collect all the reindeers in the fence, and we select the ones who are going to live along and going to reproduce, and then we are selecting those who are going to go to the butchery, and where we are going to get our income of the reindeer herding. And then the reindeer herders winter, it's mainly just feeding the reindeers. we collect all the reindeers then home, usually in December, but like this year it was already in November, and we keep them inside the fence, so it is easier to feed them, and we don't have to drive so long distances to feed them, because anyway they are not going to find any more food in the forest, so it is just same thing to keep them in the fence and feed there. And then the feeding continues until the snow has melted, and then the reindeers are free to go again. So that is how the year is for us.
Would you say that within the Scandinavian countries, Norway, Sweden, and Finland, do you think the laws and policy about Sámi people and communities, do you think they're very different?
Yeah, there is a huge difference. We can see it. Like in Sweden and Norway, the Sámi people, they have stronger rights. But in Finland, all the rights has been taken off from the Sámi people and from the reindeer herders. So there is only a small area in the north of the Finland and the northwest of the Finland where they can do something about, like they can negotiate with the government where they are cutting the forest and where they are tilling the land, but basically it is just how the government feels. It can do what it wants. But like in Sweden and in Norway, in the Sámi people, they have right to say that like if you want to build the windmills, they can say that you cannot build to our reindeer herding area. They have the right to say no. We don't have the same right in Finland. And it seems that in Finland, everything is for sale. Because this year, just a few weeks ago, we got an announcement that there is one major company who has got the right to search for the minerals from the last wilderness areas of the Lapland. So the last remote areas that are in the state that they have been like hundreds and hundreds of years. So it was the first permission. Now they can search for the minerals. So it seems that if you have the money, you can just come Finland and you can do what you want. And again, the reindeer herders just have to flee the area, and they don't have any right to continue their living, their culture. They just have to flee from the area. So there is a big difference.
Would you say, if we're talking about how industry, we start talking about how industry is affecting reindeer herding, how is the forestry industry specifically affecting your life and the Sámi community in Finland?
Well, like I said, the forest industry, the first we have to go to the way that the logging is done in Finland. The habit is that in Finland, you cut huge areas completely plain, all the trees off. No matter if they are young or old, everything off. And after that, you turn the soil around. So virtually there is nothing left to eat. So that is the Finnish government way of doing the forestry. And when there's no trees, the reindeers lose the most important food for the springtime when there is a really deep, heavy snow. There is one type of fungus that lives in the old trees. I don't know the English name for it, but it is the main food source for the reindeers during the deep snow. So first we lose that. And when they turn the soil around, we lose the lichen, which is in the autumn time really important. And when the time when there is some snow, but not too deep for the reindeers. And the third most important thing is that when there is no trees, there is no mushrooms anymore, because they live in symbiosis with the trees. And the mushroom is the most important food for the reindeers to gather weight before everything freezes. So it has a really heavy impact for the reindeer herding. And there would be a way to do it so that it doesn't harm the reindeer herding, like it has been done for hundreds and hundreds of years. In the older days, they selected the wood that they needed, and there was always forest standing, so you didn't have to disturb the soil, because the soil recovery in Lapland, it's really slow, and it can easily take 100 years for the soil to recover. But because the forest is now cut down in the average age of 90 years, the soil will never recover because it's turned around again and again. So it has heavy impact.
And you were saying the land close by your place is going to be tilled and clear cut, and how it would affect you?
Well, yes, from near of our place, everything has been already cut down during the last winter. There was logging done near our place from December to the March. So virtually almost everything is now cut down. And because of the coronavirus, all the negotiations with the government have been cancelled. So now we just got maps and they say that everything is going to be turned over and we don't have any chance to say anything about it. And because we live so south in middle of the Lapland, we can just ask them not to turn the soil around, but it doesn't make any difference because they will do it anyway, because they just don't care about reindeer herding. It's just on their way, so they cannot make the maximum profit of what they could do from the forest.
And you were saying, basically some of the things that are being supplied with the Lapland forestry industry. Do you know any of those products?
Well, the main product which is made from the trees of the Lapland is paper. And like we have saw that the really old forests, like 300 years old forest, they have been just cut down to make just paper out of them. Because of course the old trees, they are not anymore straight. There is some bad quality in them, so the government thinks that it's waste tree and you have to clear everything out of the way so you can plant their new trees and get the better quality wood. So sadly, all the forests, they are basically there is toilet paper made out of them, and then it's transported abroad.
So if you were talking about industry, how would you say mining affects reindeer herding and you personally?
Well, the mining really itself, it doesn't really affect reindeer herding, because usually the minerals are in the places that are not suitable for the reindeer herding. Usually they are not. But when you start to transport everything from the mine, there is going to be heavy truck traffic, and it's always going all the way through the Lapland. So basically it means that now our main roads, there is going one truck with minerals every half an hour on the road, plus all the traffic that is there already. And if all the mines will be open that they are planning, there is going to go one truck every 15 minutes from north to south. And of course they are coming back, so there's going to be going big trucks every about 7 to 10 minutes on the road. And of course the reindeers, they have to cross the roads, so it is the worst thing. There's going to be more and more accidents with the reindeers and the cars. It makes the biggest impact. And then if you make the mine directly on the reindeer herding pastures, like it seems that they are going to plan in the northwest of the Lapland, you are going to cut the natural paths of the reindeer, so they cannot anymore, you cannot anymore change the pastures from winter pastures to summer pastures, and then the pastures are wearing out fast, and eventually it leads to that you have to feed the reindeers all the time, or then you have to just quit the reindeer herding. So if it's made really, if there is the worst case scenario, it means that it will end the reindeer herding in those areas.
So when you're speaking about feeding the reindeer year-round and things like that, could you explain why that's so difficult to maintain and why that would affect traditional ways of life?
Well, of course, the first thing is that it is affecting the traditional way of living. In the wilderness areas, it is virtually impossible to feed the reindeers, because the closest road can be 60 kilometers away. And when you're hauling the food for the reindeers, and it's just the job that it is impossible for one family to do. You should be driving the 60 kilometers back and forth all the time to get enough food for the reindeers. And even if you manage to do it, all the profit has been gone to the company who sells the reindeer food. So it makes it impossible, as well as it makes the feeding them all year around. There's just, the reindeers don't make enough profit that you can do it. So it ends the reindeer herding.
So when people can't afford to maintain, sorry, and continue being reindeer herders, would you say they move to cities, or what do they do after that?
Yes, it's the only way. You have to move to the city because the reindeer herding is virtually the only thing that you can do here. Or then you have to move to the city to work in office or something, or factory, or then you have to have something else to do. Like lots of the reindeer herding families, they are now involved in in tourism industry. So they are having visitors at their place to get some extra income to feed the reindeers. So it's just you have to do something else. If you don't have that good chance that you can have the place where to have the visitors, then you just have to quit. Because you cannot go to the everyday work and keep the reindeers in the same time. It's just impossible thing to do.
We were talking a few months ago about how the tourism industry in Finland isn't representative of the Sámi community. So there'll be, you said there are people who dress up as Sámi who aren't Sámi, and then the proceeds from these tourist companies don't necessarily go to the communities. Could you speak a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, it's one of the downsides of the tourism industry in Finland, because lots of people, they come to the Lapland to see the reindeers. They come to see the Sámi people, to visit the Sámi people. So of course it makes it very tempting to use the culture to make the money. And lots of the big companies, they just hire somebody to be Sámi. They take the fake costumes and everything, and then they tell stories that really are not true. They tell the stories for the visitors to make the money, and it's not a good thing, because of course you spread the false things about the Sámi people, because only the Sámi people can tell about their culture because they are living it. For the somebody coming outside of the culture, they can not just tell the right things. Then it usually it goes to that it affects the public opinions, and then there is the false things that the people hear, and they usually it creates conflicts between the reindeer herders and not reindeer herders. And sometimes it goes even so far that everything has to be settled out in the court, and which is bad thing, of course. It makes more friction with the reindeer herders and the other people who are using the land.
So for anyone here who would want to visit Lapland and experience some reindeer herding, how would you say that they go about not buying into the fake tourist companies and finding someone like your family who needs the support?
Yeah, if you really want to go and visit the real reindeer herder families, then you just have to find it somewhere outside of these big touristic areas, really small companies, because even the reindeer herder families, if they want to have tourists, they have to have the company to do it. So you have to find a small company that does it, and really there is not really a way that a foreign people can tell really who is Sámi and who is not. It's just impossible from somebody who comes far away. So you just have to try to do your best and find the real reindeer herder families, the small companies that are doing it. Yeah.
Before we run out of time, I was just going to ask you a little bit. You mentioned things about climate change earlier. I was hoping you could talk about how climate change is affecting your reindeer herding and Finnish reindeer herding, and also explain the blue ice phenomenon that went on in Sweden this year.
Yeah, the climate change, it affects a lot of reindeer herding. Like when the years are getting warmer and warmer, and autumns they are getting longer, and we get more rain, and then it happens usually. It's quite common nowadays that first we get some snow, 20-30 centimeters of snow. On top of that, we get heavy rain. Then there comes -degrees, again rain and -degrees. And then it creates a solid ice in the ground, which reindeers cannot get through. So it usually, when it happens, like this year, it launches a migration of the reindeers, and they just head south, and they try to find somewhere the land which is not frozen. But we're of course it's not possible, because it's always the same situation all over the Lapland. So it makes the reindeer herders work even more difficult. Like normal years, our reindeers, they stay in the about 30 kilometers radius of our house. And this year, when they started to migrate, we took some reindeers home that they have been walking over 200 kilometers south. So, and it was all over the Lapland, also in Norway, also in Sweden. And this was the first year that major part of the reindeer herders had to feed the reindeers. There was lots of families who have never been feeding reindeers, and now they have to do it. And for those people who live in the remote areas and keep their reindeers in the wilderness area, as I explained, it was really hard. It was really hard to take all the food to the forest or to the fell area, mountain area, 60 kilometers away from the roads. So virtually they were doing work day and night there. So the climate change, it changes reindeer herding really fast too.
So when you were talking about your reindeers heading south, could you explain to everyone what you had to do to get your reindeers back, and how much of an effort that is for reindeer herders like yourself?
Yeah, because now when we have to move the reindeers to our place, when they travel far away, of course we need to have trucks or vans that we use to transport the reindeers. So for on top of the work that we usually do, we do the full day from morning to evening, usually 12 hours every day. And after that, we head to pick up the reindeers that have gone far away from our place. And usually it happens that the reindeer herders of the foreign areas, they catch your reindeer, they look the earmark, and then they know from the earmark that who owns the reindeer, and you get the phone call that your reindeer is here 200 kilometers away from your place, and then we head there and pick it up and bring it home. So it makes some good extra work for us.
I was hoping we could end with the story that you were telling me about your children trying to save your farm, and basically understanding the gravity of the situation. And they're all so young, 11 years old and younger. But if you could share that story, I think that'd be really nice.
Yeah, it was one day in the winter time. when we were working with the reindeer day and night, and then the children were at home, they were discussing about how the reindeer herding is going to continue. And even after they are so young, the oldest one is 11 and the youngest one 5. So they were thinking about what they have to do to continue the reindeer herding, what they need to learn to support the reindeer herding. So virtually they were thinking that, okay, maybe one should be a vet, so he or she will know what is wrong with the reindeers and they can make them survive better. And then one has to be, is it like engineer, to know how to repair all the snowmobiles, quad bikes, cars. And then they were of course thinking about working in the tourism industry, and they were thinking that, okay, one of us could take the visitors to our place and show the reindeers and how we live. So it was nice thing to notice from the young people at they are thinking about our future. And it has been like that with the reindeer herders always, that they are really flexible. And I really think the reindeer herders are the last people who are going to leave here anyway, because they are always just, they are changing their way of living, and they are getting a new ways how to live, and they are getting the new equipment from the outside of the reindeer herding. And so anyway, I think the reindeer herding is going to survive, but it's going to change a lot. And some point it's going to go to that maybe that the reindeer herding it's more like a hobby, that you have to have another work to do, and then the reindeer herding is just extra to keep up your culture. In worst case, it's going to go like that, but it's going on still.
I think that's really nice. I think that's all the time we have. I'm trying to be conscious of the hour, but thank you everyone for listening so much. There are many people here who might have ideas or suggestions or want to get involved in the project, and we would love to hear from you. And other than that, thank you so much for being here, and I hope you have a great weekend.